Now you should be optimizing and designing your experience so that you're getting the data because you're going to actually do stuff with it. And so next week you're going to get back together as a team as to see what worked, what didn't work, what do we learn, and then take different actions based on the data. Okay. So it's not getting data to report it, it's getting data to use it to actually influence what you do.
Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 333. Today is Sunday the 23rd of June 2019. And this interview is with Samuel Monnie. Samuel runs digital transformation at Campbell Soup, in charge of digital and e-commerce. In this talk with Samuel, we talk about the real operational challenges of driving change and digital transformation in a large consumer products company with many different brands such as Plum Organic, Pepperidge Farm, V8 and Prego. Samuel delivers some tips and insights on what it takes under the hood to make change come about and to build the right capabilities. Welcome to the Minter Dialogue podcast, where we discuss branding and all things digital. I am Minter Dial, your host, and you'll find the show notes on my eponymous site, minterdial.com. Enjoy the show. Samuel Monnie, great to have you on the show. We connected through a mutual friend and podcaster, and then I got to find out about your story living in Philadelphia with something of a British accent, which sounded so familiar to me, since I have a Philadelphia past and possible links to England. So you are running digital transformation at Campbell Soup. In your own words, how do you describe yourself, Samuel?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've been in the Philly area for the last 4.5 years, in the US around just over 10 years now. I'm a born and bred Brit, so I still have the challenge of translating elevators and lifts and boots and trunks and all those types of thing. And my wife does nudge me every so often and say, you're becoming more American, because to be understood with language, you often change without realizing subconsciously. And then when I come back to the UK, I do get my friends who do rib me when I say the wrong version of things. They think in the UK to say spanner in the works, whereas in the US it's wrench in the works. So those types of things, it's kind of hard to keep it all straight. But the best thing coming back is whenever I drive, I need to follow someone for the first 10 minutes when I'm driving to make sure I'm driving on the correct side of the road. Mm-hmm. So that's but yep, I've been living in the US now for just over 10 years and really loving it. Kind of one of these annoying people who claims to be a global citizen, because I left the UK almost 15 years ago. So spent a couple of years in Switzerland, working in a global role for the Gillette and P&G brands, and then spent just over 3 years in Germany, actually, working on the Braun appliances brand, and arrived in Germany just before that 2012 World Cup? When was the World Cup out there? My mind is it's not working on me, but just before the World Cup in Germany, and that was just an awesome time. And so been a bit of a global citizen, and really the work I do now in digital transformation has been a bit of a journey as a marketer over time. I've always been curious and sort of poking around what's next and what's happening. I remember when, social media was just bubbling up and trying to figure all that out and getting involved in Second Life and all these things that were the new things in marketing. And so I kind of wear more of a marketing-centric digital transformation hat, where modern marketing is what the aim and ambition is, and the effort is how we're going to get to a place where we can engage with consumers and delight them, but leverage the technology, the platforms, the processes in order to do that. But I think my super skill, my special focus area is really less about the stuff and the tech and more about the people. And for me,
sounds good. So tell us, how did you get to the States then from Germany before you got to this role in Campbell in Philadelphia?
My beautiful wife. So I met my wife was actually living overseas. So we had an international relationship. So when people tell their long distance travel stories, I always kind of usurp them with my actually I was living in Frankfurt or Geneva at the time, and my wife was in Midwest Wisconsin, so long distance was about 8 hours on the flight. for us.
Well, at least
And
there's
then,
Skype in between, right?
well, no,
Or
not at the time.
FaceTime.
This actually, I think before this we were talking about the value of technology. This is a time when we used to basically landline to or cell phone each other at times of the day that could work. So with the advent of Insta and Twitter and Skype and all these things, the world has changed so dramatically that distance isn't really an excuse to not stay connected, stay up to date, and stay in time. And for me, the thing I find most hilarious about how we communicate is, if we wanted to communicate what's for dinner or what we're going to have or what we need, we're often sending pictures to each other. So especially in grocery stores, it's brilliant. It's now impossible to not buy the right thing or not get the right brand.
Right, so you guys are an international Instagram couple.
Yeah, so we're now, we're about now. My wife's American, so that's the whole linkage of how it got me here. She's from the Midwest, but we now live in Philly, and we met on a business trip, and started dating internationally, and the rest is history. But I'm really, I've always worked for American companies, so in my career, so it was fascinating to kind of end up being in the US and then seeing the world from the US lens and all the things that. US is a melting pot, but also some of the disconnects or the divergences from having been in Germany or having been in other cultures. And I think the biggest one, I think maybe from the folks on the call, is on the podcast rather, is the fact that the growth of the discounters, the Aldis and Lidls in the US, has been a huge shift and change in terms of the consumers have responded to it, but also the brands and the retailers are struggling to compete. Whereas being a Brit, I kind of grew up as a marketer with Aldi and Lidl, and then I lived in Germany, which is their home market for 3 years. So for me, it's a fascinating how innovation or change slowly comes across, but when it does, it's a major disruption.
Okay, so let's start with Campbell Soup. For those of us who don't know so well Campbell, of course it's got a very recognizable name, but tell us more about the size of the company, the types of brands you're running, and how much of your business is outside of the North America.
Yeah, so Campbell Soup Company is an $8.5 billion organization, and it's got brands that internationally I think some people know. So the Campbell Soup brand is probably the one it's most famous for, and it has brands in sort of what we describe as meals and beverages categories. So it'd be Prego pasta sauce. There's a Swanson broth brand. There's also some beverage brands. V8. V8 Juice is another brand that we have, and the Plum Organics, which is an organic baby food brand. And then on the snack side, there's a wealth of brands under the name of Pepperidge Farm, Farmhouse. There is Goldfish, which is a cracker product, sure. And a lot of Milano's, which is a cookie. And then for both sides of the pond, the brand Kettle Chips is actually owned by Campbell as well. So I'm a huge Kettle Chips fan on both sides of the pond.
I had a bunch of Milanos on the plane over. So listen, you are you're the director of digital transformation at Campbell Soup. And so tell us what does that mean to be the director of digital transformation, and how do you occupy the terrain?
So the focus areas, there are sort of 4 or 5 or 6 areas, but ultimately it's to drive a modern marketing capability. So it's thinking about it from the digital marketing perspective, and creating modern marketers by driving people capabilities is kind of a huge priority. Certainly on my plate, there's some other priorities. Driving our owned properties, improved outcomes from them, and improving our measurement and the mindset and spirit of constant optimization. Linking our technology roadmap to what our needs are as a business as well. So making sure it's fit for purpose. And the other key focus for me right now is really embedding the consumer journey thinking throughout our efforts and our works, and to ensure that the consumer experiences are, we delight consumers, but really taking that consumer lens, which is easier said than done. And so the technology for me and for a lot of us is really an enabler to do that. So you have your multitude, I won't even get into the jargon, multitude of different platforms, be it your data, be it your media, be it your assets, be it your information. And how do you pull that all together so you can act in real time, you can optimize, and you can test and learn, and
make that happen. You've got so many things you're taking care of. How do you go about addressing that?
So it's picking priorities and going after it. I think that for me, the biggest one front of mind, punching me in the face right now, is this consumer journey thinking and embedding that throughout everything we do, and really focusing on what does the consumer want? How well do we understand them? What's the mindset that they're in? And then ensuring that what we do is really driven by how they're thinking, feeling in that moment. And then designing solutions, designing products and services, and designing communication for them. We're kind of starting more on, here's what we have, let's improve our communication. The evolution is to actually be using that data as our driver of innovation, new products, new initiatives, new programs. And so building up that muscle is, I think, the biggest challenge we have, and a lot of organizations have, because it's shifting our way of working really to be ready and receptive to what's happening, what we see. And that data now is what we should use to then decide what we're going to do next. And so pivoting, I think for me, the analogy I would use, again, I'm thinking more to like the work of marketers, is often you're pulling data to report out in a deck in two weeks time. Now you should be optimizing and designing your experience so that you're getting the data because you're going to actually do stuff with it. And so next week you're going to get back together as a team as to see what worked, what didn't work, what do we learn, and then take different actions based on the data. Okay. So it's not getting data to report it, it's getting data to use it to actually influence what you do.
With so many different players that you must be involved with, starting with your Aldis and Walmarts and the distribution through to the sales teams and marketing, legal, and so on, how do you manage to collate the right data, and how much of that challenges that? And then second of all, how do you manage that consumer messaging you were talking about with so many people participating in it?
This is, I wish I had all the answers. It's a learning experience and it's a humbling experience. For me, when I think about this space, digital transformation, it's very much about capability building. And the capability building could be like learning new skills or optimizing resources or organizing. But it's fundamentally, for me, the biggest pain point is ways of working, how things are done. So you ask a great question, how do we do that? It could be as simple as shifting the emphasis of why we're getting together. We're getting together for 55, 60 minutes, not to decide the bar charts or what does this mean? What is going on? So that what's happening on the traffic to the site right now? Do we know that the buy now is work? How is the page working for us? What content's working best for us? Are we serving that content back up to consumers? How fast is our page loading? How much faster does it need to be before we start losing people? How many people are we losing? Where do they go next? So all of a sudden, if you have an owned experience, you are immersing in that so much that it's not the specialist job only to know how to do that. It's not just the search person. You've got the search person, you've got the media person, you've got the marketing technology person, you've got the marketing person, you'd have a legal. So you have a coalition of people who don't need to master every single item, but you certainly need collectively to have the skills, and you need to get it. And so what happens now is that, perhaps the old processes of working with folks in legal would be they have their standard approval process. But if you want to push out real-time content, it can't take 2 weeks to approve a tweet. That's not going to work in 2019. And so a lot of the disciplines are having to shift and pivot. So the changes in the technology is impacting not just marketing, but all the other functions as well, because we have to renegotiate how we work together, which is a ways of working shift. And it changes the power dynamic. It changes the roles and responsibilities. It changes the expectation of what you're doing now. And that is all new for us as an organization, and new for people as well. So if you've been doing your role for 5-10 years, now I feel that now, especially more than ever, you're having to redetermine what your job is and how you do it. And the common factor is human beings. Until the robots and AI takes over, human beings have to change, and change management is really, really difficult. So ways of working, people, change management is a lot of the time I spend my effort and my energy. And it's hard, but it's fun, it's rewarding. And that's where I spend, I think, 80% of my time right now.
So you have a boss who is presumably giving you instruction, and sometimes I'm going to have to guess you have to push back and say, boss,
Yes.
decision-making process took too long.
Yes.
I sent you an email last week, you still haven't replied, and it referred to a program that was running on Friday last week. Is that something that you do face? Because let me just say, Samuel, in my experience, gray-haired and all, the mirroring of what you're trying to communicate in a customer service or customer first type of approach has to be with a style of communication internally. So that if you wanting to be serviceable and serviable, if you will, towards the customer and responsive in a specific time period, you need to somehow replicate that kind of spirit and time frame within the company communication.
You hit the nail on the head. One of the things which again is more, I've led some efforts, not created the program, but I've been a huge advocate of our enhanced decision-making framework. And one of the key premises of this approach, of this philosophy, is not just a racy with putting names in boxes. It's more about speed and decision-making. And the fundamental driver of that is pushing the decision closest to the person with the data. The person with the data is supposed to make the call, write the sentence, make the call, make the decision, drive the next step and drive the action, which is fundamentally shifting how we would normally make decisions, right? We would normally try and escalate things to the most senior person, and now it's pushing it down. No, who's most qualified? Who actually is the expert who's the analyst? Who's the web analyst who knows actually what consumers are doing, what's the last click they're doing, or what activity they're doing, so they can make the call to change the buy now button to get ingredients. Because we know that people at Campbell, they come to the site because they actually want to make a recipe. Well, we got to focus more on helping them make a recipe versus just trying to sell them a product. So that is a decision that the person who's analyzing the site can make, and not escalate that to a marketing director elsewhere. That's a decision they can make an action. So those are the types of thing where the real consumer-centric approach is forcing us to not take 2 weeks to make a decision. It cannot be that you know something about your campaign, but you have to wait 2 weeks before you present it to a senior marketing leader. No, you have to be able to say, we tested this, we've learned that this version is working better, we're going to optimize and go, and we're going to give you the better outcome and the results. We're not going to ask for your permission.
So how do you materially do that, Samuel? That's to say, how do you define the amount of delegation that you're going to have for the person at the coalface?
It's a negotiation. So it could be as pedantic, and it's as pedantic as actually having documentation and capturing who makes the decision, who is an advisor, who is just to be informed, and who owns doing the work. And so we have some frameworks and principles, but it's living into it and it's shifting work. So what, in answer to your questions, we actually going as far as documenting it specifically at a category level, at a function level, at a role level, and then at a project level, which can be quite pithy, but it's that renegotiation and working as a team. And I will use the word agile as an aspiration. We're not there yet, but as we see the benefits of working in a more agile way, this becomes more realizable. And especially when you're working with marketing in a way that is leveraging technology, you have to work in a more agile way to get a site up and running in a shorter space of time, and bringing a coalition of resources together. Those folks drive the work and the timings and the outputs and the cadence of execution. So we're renegotiating on a informal way, but actually some structured efforts in more formally renegotiating and committing on paper. This is the person who has the decision. And last year it may have been 2 or 3 levels up. This year it's the person with the data, and we all agree this is the person with the data. So it's change. It's uncomfortable. That I thrive in an uncomfortable environment because it means that we're doing things differently. But that for me is the intellectual approach, but also the practical approach of just getting in there and doing it and figuring it out, not using our current way of working as an excuse to slow us down.
Samuel, in that you've been doing this now for 4.5 years at Campbell, if you had a magic wand, what would you wave it at to really try to nail and accelerate towards this ideal of an agile company?
For me, the biggest wand I would wave is the real true understanding of the word capability. There's often capabilities are stuff, technology or infrastructure or maybe certain other resources. But for me, the biggest one I would wave is on the people and helping them be better. So a lot of the work I've been doing in my space has actually been in the marketing capability space, is the power of asking and answering questions. And so the approach that I love is to be able to frame questioning in a way that allows you to sort of process the question, and then your mission is to try and solve it in a better way. In some cultures, asking questions is seen as, insubordination, rude, challenging authority, resisting, being difficult. But the true spirit of a great question is helping you unlock a solution to growing or being better. So the fundamentals of asking questions in the ways of working for me is like the magic wand. How might we get there better? Why do consumers do what they do? What are their underlying beliefs? Who are the consumers whose behavior we want to change, and we know that they'll grow? How do we know we're meeting expectations? Those are the kind of questions that for me prompt our ability to get better.
Sorry about that. So you also, on your LinkedIn profile, you talk about your desire to make remarkable learning experiences, a cultivate a growth mindset. As someone who's spent a lot of time in education and this notion of learning, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that entails.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Carol Dweck, who was a professor who one of the thought leaders in this growth mindset space. And it was, for me, an aha and eye-opener when you think about the principles of growth mindset, which, for the listeners here, it talks about you're probably wired in a way from society and other places that talent is, you either have talent or you don't. You're either smart or you're not. You're either good at something or you're not. And as you think about the growth mindset, it actually shines a light that actually effort is the path to mastery. So there's no such thing as, yes, people have skills and abilities. I'm not going to outplay LeBron James at basketball. But what actually you realize is that you can learn and improve. And so if you can accept the effort is the work that you need to do to improve, then you're less vested on being smart or not. You're more willing to, well, if I don't know something, growth mindset says, well, let me ask. If I ask the question, then I'm smarter because I'll find out the answer, and everyone else is smarter because they'll hear it. But if I'm the type of person, I should know this, I should get this, I should really be able to do this. That's a constraint and restricting. So you learn from your failures. You can learn from other people's successes. So someone else does well is not a threat to you. It means that success is something that you can learn from and admire and question to improve. So the growth mindset is a philosophy, and the baked into how I've delivered that and how I've built upon that is by focusing on being able to ask and answer great questions. And I'll talk a bit more about this. For me, the power of questions is, Einstein has this quote: if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I'd use the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. And one of the best stories I love about questions and the power of questions is the story from 10, 15 years ago when Audi was entering the Le Mans 24-hour race. And everyone knows that to win the Le Mans race, it's a 24-hour endurance race. So you drive around, and whoever drives the furthest over 24 hours wins. And they got to build a faster car. Everyone knows, to win the race, you got to build a faster car. Well, Audi didn't have the budget and the footprint of other companies. And how the hell are they going to build the fastest car? So they asked themselves a different question. Their question was, how could we win Le Mans if our car could go no faster than anyone else's? So how can we win if it can't go faster? And they actually concluded, well, why don't we just change the fuel to diesel? So by asking that question, they changed the fuel to diesel, and then for 3 years in a row they won the race because they didn't try and make the spoilers this or take weight off. They just changed the fuel. Diesel wasn't invented in 2006, but everyone else is using petrol, gas, and they changed the diesel by asking that improved question. So the growth mindset is not to say, oh, we can't win, we don't have enough money, they're bigger or better than us. It's really allowing yourself to take a step back and exploring. And I think that for me, the power of questions and the power of asking great propelling questions is the unlock where Aldi could win when they were the new kids on the block in a competitive industry.
So I love the fact that we have talked about Aldi and Audi. One last question, Samuel, which is that of all the things that are impacting Campbell's business, and I'm thinking from the external side, whether it's a change in distribution or a arrival of some technology or regulation or, the broad span of things which are impacting business, which ones are you the most fearful of for the next few years and keep you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? I keep coming back to the same, I'm like a broken record. What keeps me up at night is the world is changing. How are we changing the work? I've determined that you cannot get any more hours in a day than 24. And so what keeps me up at night is if we're doing the same things today that we did yesterday, that's not going to cut it. So how do you transform the organizational capability? How do you just transform the resources or even the people? We are powered by human beings. The great thinking, the creativity, the innovation, the quality, the legal stuff, the market, it's all driven by people, and the technology can help us. So what keeps me awake at night is that shift in ways of working, time spent, how we work together to get to better outcomes, and being trapped by the current way of working and meeting and communicating, collaborating.
I get that. What I was looking for was, of the numerous exogenous elements, which are the ones that you're most worried of? In other words, that are impacting the way you're working, that are impacting your business. So it could be artificial intelligence, IoT, regulations, change in distribution. Where are the zones that you feel are going to be the most preoccupying and impacting your business?
From the marketplace, it's the consumers have more choice and have more choices that they can action upon. And so they aren't vested in finding us on the same shelf in the same place that they've always done. There are other what we call challenger brands getting to people more directly by finding solutions to their needs, by coming up with propositions with different ingredients. And they don't need to follow the same sort of mass retail approach to get to you and I. So every day if I go onto Instagram, I am being bombarded with a multitude of seaweed snacks and all these other things that I don't need to discover you on a shelf. Those brands and those technologies allow my passions, my loves, my desires, my needs to be known and identified and interjected in a new way earlier in the chain, through coming to me directly. We've seen the growth of the meal kit type phenomenon, and that's kind of plateauing and evolving. But that aspect of a more convenient solution, portioned, and sort of that engagement of self-creation, that's disrupt how people consume and eat food. That's a disruption, but that was a partial insight-driven, but also interacting with me in a different way. I didn't have to go to the store to buy a meal kit. Those brands were reaching me and solving my problem in my home. So what keeps me awake at night are the disruption to the traditional channels of buying things, the disruption to the traditional ways of communicating to me. And now when I go into my Google and I'm typing an email to you, Minter, it kind of predicts what I'm going to say. And what's frightening to me with the AI is that it's now getting it pretty good. So now I kind of change what I'm going to write because it was predicting what I wanted to write. So now I'm changing it. So I think the insight of the technology is so smart. It knows us better than ourselves. And as from a brand or marketing perspective, it means that what if I'm typing an email and there's a message talks about, you're feeling hungry and you love something, lime flavored. How about this? I perhaps wouldn't resist that message now than I would a few years ago. So the way of communicating to me differently, I think, is also evolving rapidly. And then voice. You know, 4 years ago, I think I got my Amazon Echo 3 years ago. It was a fad, it was a novelty, it was a stupid idea. Now you see the we see in consumer research. I've seen consumers in the middle of being, you know, we're checking their response to this brand. In the middle of it, they're saying, "Hey, Alexa, add eggs to my grocery list," and the consumer isn't saying, "Oh, look, I have an Alexa. I have an Echo. I have an Alexa." The consumer doesn't see it as anything special. It's easier, quicker, and faster. Oh, sorry if you can hear that. That's the challenge. Alexa's actually been triggered by my voice. You know, the consumer. Alexa, stop. There you go. Real time.
We're in real time. That's totally normal. I have mine beside me, but I'm not saying the word. Yeah,
so the technology now is listening out and responding to you in voice, and it's part of the family and part of the furniture, and that now is normal. So it's not weird or spooky or freaky. It's actually an extra member of family and an extra resource. So I think it's not what keeps me awake at night. It's actually what excites me. How well do we understand what this means for how we work and how we eat and how we live, and how as a marketer or how as a company am I showing up in a relevant way? And again, it's an area that 3 years ago was that's just a sidebar. Now, was it 30-40% of homes have voice in there, so it's going to be, you know, mainstream in the next 2.5 years. That's such a rapid shift that I know many companies and many brands aren't aware, aren't ready for, and haven't really prioritized it. So I know I've waffled on a bit, but for me, it's things like that, but also the prioritization. We're going to have to make some decisions on whether we're going to push voice up in our priority list or not. And my personal passion is yes, we should, because it's something that is now ubiquitous.
Great. So, Samuel, this is what I've taken away from you in this chat. First, the power of data surrounding the customer and making the customer's information available to everybody. Second is the importance of communication and the decision-making process within the company. Third is digital transformation is actually only or largely about people. And fourth, you need to make the effort in order to learn. So those were my takeaways. Great to have you on the show, Samuel. Tell us, how can someone track you down, listen to what you're up to, or connect with you as you prefer?
Yeah, the best way to get hold of me is on Twitter. So at Samuel Monnie, I'm pontificating and engaging and sharing and resharing information and things that catch my eye through there. And the other best platform is on LinkedIn. So again, my name's Samuel Monnie. You'll find me there, sharing articles, inspiration, talking a lot of things, marketing, technology, and especially capability building, how we're all going to get better at what we do, be it in the field of marketing or other areas.
Spectacular. Samuel, good luck with everything. Enjoy the summer and continued success at Campbell Soup.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minter Dialogue Show. You'll find the show notes and other blog posts on minterdial.com. If you enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes to give a rating and review. And to finish, here's a song I wrote with Stephanie Singer, A Convinced Man.
Tucked around me, precipitating the danger. To feel free, trust is the reason. Still I won't toe the line. I sit here passively, hope for your respect, anticipating the thrill of your intellect. Maybe I tell myself there's no use in me lying. I'm a convinced man, building an urge. I'm a convinced man, to live and die submerged. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. I'm a convinced man, challenge my fate. I'm a convinced man, competition's innate. A convinced man, in the arms of a woman. Despite a challenge, so life's not incomplete. What's wrong with challenge? I know soon we all die. I like the feel of a stranger tucked around me, precipitating the danger. To feel free, trust in my reason, and let me show you why.